So 2 p.m. on Tuesday, June 18th. I would like to welcome all of you to the Los Lunas Schools Board of Education. And I would like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome those who are participating in the Board of Education meeting in person and those watching this meeting via live streaming on YouTube. We would ask that anyone addressing the board to use the microphone at the podium and to identify themselves for the record. As a reminder, the link to the meeting is on the district webpage under Board of Education. The streaming will run through the end of the meeting. In the event there is a disruption in the audio portion, I will pause the meeting until it is reestablished. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and today we are very fortunate to have the son of Vice President Mrs. Otero, Mr. Gabriel Otero, who is an 8-year-old young man. He attends Peralta Elementary School and he will be going into the 3rd grade. If you would stand with me, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. Look right back there. Thank you. You may be seated. Okay, Mrs. Wolf, please take roll call and announce it for the minutes.
Dr. Sasky,
Present.
Ms. Otero. Here. Mr. Talley. Attending via teleconference, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Vickers.
Here.
They are all here, and again, Mr. Talley is participating.
As allowed by the OMA and the district's open meetings resolution, Mr. Talley will be participating via telephone. And we have ascertained that Mr. Talley can be heard and also can hear what is occurring in the meeting. We are now on item B, the announcement of the meeting. Dr. Kettler, would you please announce the meeting?
Madam President, this meeting has been announced in accordance with the open meetings resolution and is a legally constituted meeting of the Los Lunas Schools Board of Education.
Thank you very much. We are on to item C, executive approval of the prioritized agenda. Dr. Kettler, are there any changes or deletions to the agenda?
Madam President, I do not have any recommended changes or deletions.
Thank you very much. I would stand for a motion regarding the approval of the agenda.
Dr. Osowski, I move that we approve the agenda with the following exception. I would like to move item J, consideration of approval of professional services contract for an attorney to represent the Los Lunas School Board of Education. I would like to move it to immediately follow item C, the approval of prioritized agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Talley. Do I have a second to Mr. Talley's motion? Do I have a second?
What was the motion again, please?
The motion is to approve the agenda as published with the exception of item J, to move it to the next item, which will now become item D, for lack of a better phrasing, as opposed to in its regular order. Just wants to move it up.
I second it.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Talley has moved and Mr. Bennett has seconded to approve the agenda with the change of item J being moved to now effectively item D. Is there any discussion? Mr. Vickers, any discussion?
I'm just wondering what the reasoning is behind that.
Mr. Talley, can you provide a reason?
Yeah, so I'm, 8 hours different than you guys. I was hoping to be able to be part of the discussion, and following that discussion, I'm gonna drop off so I can go back to sleep.
Did you need any other information, Mr. Vickers?
Oh,
Mrs. Otero, do you have any questions or comments? Mr. Bennett, any questions or comments? I'm going to call for a vote, please. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
yes.
Mrs. Otero?
Yes.
Mr. Talley?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
I vote yes, motion passes. Item D now, which was formerly item J, consideration of approval of a professional services contract for an attorney to represent the Los Lunas Schools Board of Education. Let me get to that. Do I have a motion to accept item J?
I motion to approve that consideration of approval for the professional service contract for the attorney to represent the Los Lunas School Board of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bennett. Do I have a second? I will second. Is there any discussion?
Salke, I just have a couple of questions. First, I'm wondering what the reasoning is for getting another attorney. The Los Lunas School Board already has a contract with Los Gallegos to represent us. If there's any reason that we don't want to use that particular attorney, I'd like to understand why. If we're unhappy with the representation, if we ask for a different representative from that law firm to represent us, or if we're unhappy with that representation, if we send a letter of concern to that firm so that they are aware of any concerns that we have. I think that we have an open contract. It's been competed, and unless we have done our due diligence, I don't see the reasoning, or I don't see it necessary to go out and get yet another law firm to represent us.
Thank you, Mr. Talley. Mr. Vickers, do you have any questions or comments?
I do, with the attorneys we have now, we have 3 firms representing the administration board, et cetera, that were all through RFPs. And I'm wondering what this does to those RFPs and, if there will be any repercussion from basically sidestepping the existing RFPs and doing this. And Dr. Keller, is there an answer to that?
Member Vickers, President Osowski, our Chief Purchasing Officer, Michelle Romero, can better answer those questions around the RFPs. So if she will approach the podium.
Good evening, Madam President, board members, Dr. Kettler. The RFP process, as Mr. Vickers mentioned and was previously stated by Mr. Talley, last year we went out for an RFP for legal services, and 4 firms were vetted by that process. The process is per the procurement code for this type of service over $60,000, which is also a 4-year contract. We've just ending the 1st year. And those firms are on contract, and they do have a right to get the business that through the vetting process that was done. I'm not familiar with the item that is on here because it did not come through the purchasing department for vetting prior to this meeting. So I can't say any more about the specifics of it because, like I said, I wasn't included in that. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
It does somewhat. The contracting question that is before us is for less than $60,000 for the year. So I guess that's per the procurement code. What does that do?
Well, the company, first off, I would need to know what the scope of work is. That would be the first question that I would look at if it was being vetted. We have a central purchasing office here at the district that is tasked and responsible with vetting all purchases for the district. Again, this didn't go through my office, so I didn't have the opportunity to review it or look at what the scope of work is, but just in looking at the agenda item, it says professional services contractor for an attorney to represent the Los Lunas School District. So that sounds like a scope of work that would be right in line with the other attorney law firms that were contracted through the vetting process through an RFP. If that is in direct competition basically with the ones that already went through that process and that vetting process, then I would think that they might have a problem with that and we could end up with a protest. It sounds to me like it might be taking business from them after they went through a process to get that, and this company is, whoever it might be, is just going to get a contract outright.
Right, thank you.
So you said that it could end up in a protest. From what I understand at the law conference, when all board members that were present had an opportunity to visit with this particular firm, that this firm and a partner, another member of this firm, informed at least two of us who had conversations that it would not be a violation with the RFP process, as they were very familiar with it. They also have assured two of us, although any board member that attended was given the contact card, that this is in alignment with what the board can request. And so in response to we received information that it was not in violation at the law conference. So I'm just putting that out there for information.
Madam Chair, let me clarify. I was at the law conference and I was not involved in any kind of discussion or negotiation.
That is correct.
Any member of this law firm.
That's correct. You were.
Where was I?
Any other questions, Mr. Bennett?
When you go back about being on the side and satisfied with the last representation of attorneys we had, I wasn't, okay? There was a lot of situations that happened last year where I felt, the board, actually the district might have been dealt with some injustice. And there was a lot of information that was provided from those attorneys, which those attorneys should have had prior to those meetings, and they didn't. So, like I said, so I did my part at the law conference. I did interview several. I've had 4 or 5 different cards. And I just think, Cuddy, and specifically this Laura Castell, could represent this district, this board, better than what we've been represented. So.
I would like to add on to that, along with Mr. Bennett's comment in terms of being unsatisfied. We had one particular situation where we received a letter. Vice President Otero and I received a letter from the Office of the Attorney General about requests for information concerning text messages on cell phones. And a representative from the Walsh Gallego law firm could not find that information in law when we attended a session at the law session, and also in the IPRA packet that is provided on the webpage for any person who wants to see it. It's clearly stated that text messages are a part of any of the Open Meetings Act requests or IPRA requests. So in terms of us contacting the Walsh Gallegos law firm, I have not made that contact. I do not understand from the RFP that I've seen that I must do that. Can you clarify that? Are we required to notify if we're unhappy with the services?
Yes.
Okay,
And
We could do
any
that.
contractor that is not performing per their scope of work, then you have to give them an opportunity to cure that.
so we
So-
could still issue them a letter saying that we're unhappy, and it does not preclude us from bringing on a different attorney.
That's two different things. You're asking about letting a vendor know if they're not performing their duties. That's one thing. Like Dr. Kettler had mentioned, or I believe, who was it? Mr. Telly? Sorry, I don't remember who said it, but there are a lot of attorneys that are in these firms. So if the board was not happy with one in particular, then I'm sure that they have an opportunity to choose a different one or use one of the other law firms that we do have on contract.
I know the other firm is the Madral Law Firm with Mr. Art Melendez, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that is one that you regularly go to.
Yes, that
So
is
there's
correct.
not necessarily a good separation between the district's functions or the Board of Education's functions.
And I do, in speaking with Mr. Melendez at Modral, since they are representing the administrative functions of the district, they would not also represent the school board.
And the same thing with the Zamora Law Firm out of Santa Fe. They have performed several of the administrative functions, correct?
They have performed some administrative functions, correct?
And Gallegos Law Firm, you have contacted a member of the Gallegos Law Firm earlier in the spring, so there again may not be a clear separation.
Correct. I have had conversations with one of their attorneys.
And that's my biggest concern, is that we don't have a clear separation between the lawyers that represent the Board of Education and those that have been advising the superintendent or the administrative functions. And I think as a board, we've had some conversations about our level of satisfaction. So that's why we pursued another option. Is there any other comment?
In open session or in that we get the session call for that. And has not happened in an open meeting, so
That's correct.
be careful saying that the board has had that discussion.
The board has not. There have been expressions of displeasure that have been given to me. So yes, that is correct. Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Talley. Is there any other discussion?
This item says consideration of approval, so it is just that, correct? Consideration, I mean, nothing's set in stone, we're not deciding on whether or not we're doing away with Walsh Gallegos Law Firm.
Not doing away with.
I'm
no.
sorry, no, okay.
Yeah. No,
So
not
this is
doing-
only just consideration, as it says.
Sure, and we can pull this on to the next board meeting once we have an opportunity. Sure.
Well, we have a motion on the floor.
We had a motion on the floor to move this item and it was read as consideration. It was not read as discussion with action.
Madam President, board members, may I add another comment?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was listening for the sound. Apologize, yes.
We have 4 law firms that are on contract that have been vetted by the RFP process, and the other one is Holcomb Law Firm.
Who?
Holcomb Law Firm. I don't know that you mentioned that name earlier.
I don't think that we knew about it earlier. Holcomb Law Firm is the 4th one.
Yes,
Mr. Kettler, Dr. Kettler, have you had any action with the Holcomb Law Firm?
I have had no, I have had interaction with Dina Holcomb at Holcomb Law Firm, just to introduce myself to her. But to this point, since I've been superintendent since August, we have not used the Holcomb Law Firm for any administrative business of the district.
Thank you very much. I don't think we have that information. Thank you very much.
you're welcome. If I may, since Mr. Bennett mentioned that this was a Cuddy Law Firm, they actually attempted to propose for the RFP that we did. And their proposal came in late after the deadline. So they were considered non-responsive. They emailed a couple of hours later and asked the superintendent in place at that moment whether or not they could override my decision and be considered to be part of the RFP process. That was denied because of the procurement code
That's
and the
correct.
laws.
I'm aware of that, and thank you. Thank you for clarifying that for the public record. I appreciate that. Okay, we do not have an action because this is consideration. So we have moved the item. Mr. Talley, do you have any other questions that you would like to ask?
Not at this point. I guess you ask the FD that it made the motion, what was his motion?
He moved for the item to be moved from item J to item C, and then we read it.
No, that was my motion.
Oh, that's
It was
correct.
Mr.
I
Bennett's motion.
apologize. You are correct. So Mr. Bennett, you did make a motion to consider the approval of a professional services contract. So you're correct. I'm sorry, Mr. Talley, you are correct. So I'm ready to move for the vote. If we have no more discussion, Mr. Vickers, do you have any more discussion?
Well, I think at the least we need to allow the law firm to know that we are not happy with the current attorney assigned to us and ask for a different option.
Okay. Mrs. Otero, do you have any other comments?
No.
Mr. Bennett, any other comments?
No.
Okay, so I will go for the vote. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
If a yes vote is approving this contract that we have in front of us, then I vote no.
Okay. Mrs. Otero,
No.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Talley,
No.
and I vote yes, motion fails. Thank you very much. Item D, which is now,
Or be participating.
thank you very much, Mr. Talley. Be safe. Do I need to do anything else? I pressed the red one. I think we're good. Okay, this moves us to former item D, which is now item E. And that is the superintendent's report. Here you go, Dr. Kettler, please.
Madam President, members of the board, tonight with us, we have the NMSBA scholarship recipient for Los Lunas Schools as selected by the Board of Education, Mr. Giovanni Maldonado. I have in my hand a letter from the New Mexico School Boards Association Executive Director, Joe Guillen, in which says, "Dear Mr. Maldonado, congratulations, you have been selected as a Region 4 2024 New Mexico School Board Association scholarship recipient. You should be proud as we received many outstanding scholarship nominations from school boards throughout New Mexico, which were reviewed and recommended by the NMSBA's regional officers and approved by our board of directors. Enclosed, and Dr. Osowski has your certificate in an envelope for you, but enclosed in that envelope, you will find your scholarship award in the amount of $1,250, which can be utilized to pay for tuition, fees, books, or any other costs necessary to pursue a degree at an institution of higher learning. We offer our most sincere congratulations and wish you luck in your future educational endeavors. Sincerely, Joe Guillen, Executive Director."
We're very proud of you, so I think I want a picture of you. There you go. Turn like this. Sure. I want to say, as Mr. Giovanni is going and shaking hands with the rest of the board members, that this young man has just been a delight to hear from. He gave a school level report for us earlier in the spring. He was incredibly active at Valencia High School. He approached Dr. Kettler and I at the Los Lunas High School academic lettering ceremony, and he was almost jumping out of his skin, if you will, because he was so certain he may have been named valedictorian, but it was a secret. So it was just so exciting to watch him as he excelled, and we are proud of you, and you're going to do amazing things. And then you please come back and let us know how we did for you, okay? Congratulations. Chip, do you want a picture with all of us? Sure. Okay. Let's all go. We're gonna pick a two. Oh, that's me. Okay, Dr. Keller, item E2.
Madam President, before I move on, Mr. Maldonado, I did fail to mention that there are 89 school districts in New Mexico. And presuming all 89 nominated a student, you are one of 24 students statewide who received this scholarship. So congratulations. Madam President, members of the board, tonight, Tiffany McMahon, Director of Maintenance and Construction, will give us a brief update on a few projects, the stadium at Los Lunas High School, track renovations, central office, parking lot issues, Desert View Elementary's cafeteria, and Peralta Elementary's construction.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Keller, thank you for having me this evening. Just a few things that we just want to highlight that we're working on throughout the district on top of our many smaller projects, maintenance and custodial happenings this summer. They're in full-fledged cleaning and fixing all of our classrooms. But as far as our larger projects, the Los Lunas High School Stadium Phase 1 was issued the notice to proceed this Monday, and they're mobilizing out there. So you'll probably see some fencing, redirecting of a little bit of traffic around the stadium area as that project begins. At the same time, we have another vendor that is going to be resurfacing our running track at Los Lunas High School. That will coincide at the same time of the startup. Another item that our teams have been working on is the central office parking lot project. We are working with an engineering firm right now to finalize designs that are needed. This is a DOT partially funded project that we are awarded funding every year. We do go out for that fund, and we are awarded pretty much every year a certain amount, and we pick a project that is in high need of some parking lot asphalt renovations. So this one, we are going to be repaving the parking lot here at central office. And the next slide, we just want to highlight some things that we're doing across the district as part of our facility master plan. We had agreed to move away from VCT tile, which is the old standard square tiles that require a lot of our custodials' time in the summer, that require stripping and waxing every year. So there's a huge cost to that. So some of the options for us were to either go with polished concrete or what you're seeing here, which is LVT, luxury vinyl tile. This will allow our custodians to not have to do that every summer. We'll be saving a substantial amount of money on materials and time for them. This is one of the first elementary schools that we have replaced the whole cafeteria. It is complete as of yesterday. The next slide we have is a couple of pictures from Peralta Elementary. With here, the top picture, you're looking at the pre-K wing. They're wrapping up the ceiling rough-in for all the electrical. If you were to go by there today, you would start seeing the walls are are all studded out, so you can actually see each classroom space. On the bottom is a picture of our gymnasium. We're fortunate to allow all the students on the concrete, and they all got to have a chalk day, drawing artwork and signing their name, and we have some lovely pictures from that. With that note, on Thursday between 8 and 9 a.m., we're having a beam signing. And what that is we're taking one of these large beams, and we have invited retired staff, current staff of the school district that all have ties to Peralta Elementary, and we're asking them to come by during that hour, sign their name, what grade they taught, if they want to leave a note on there, and that beam will be erected in the new building. And so that'll be taking place on Thursday between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. or 9 a.m. for 1 hour. If they want to stop by, you're welcome to put your name on a beam. That will be part of the new school. So we'll be doing that this week. And the last slide, we just want to highlight the work that all our custodians are doing this summer. Last week, they participated in their annual training. We bring in different vendors that talk about new chemicals, chemical safety, floor maintenance, ladder safety, different cleaning tips for them. Refresher, some of it's refresher, some of it's new. This is a picture from that day. We were able to provide them a great luncheon. And it's a time to get all the custodians together and let them know how much we appreciate them and the work they do throughout the school year. So with that, I stand for any questions.
Could you tell me again the name of the tile that we're moving to?
It is LVT, so it's luxury vinyl tile. We have started putting it in some restrooms. This is the first large space that we put it to see how it goes. If we're finding that the staff are really happy, especially our custodians, due to what it will relieve their summer schedule.
So this doesn't require the same types of
Waxing, no,
dripping,
we
'cause
can-
that's such a process.
Yes, it is, and it's costly too, and it's timely. So we find that the more we can get these large spaces done for them, it's gonna free up a lot of availability to maintain the school site in other areas.
So we're putting that in this summer in the cafeteria, is that what I understand?
We put it in Desert View Cafeteria. We have also installed that in our drama/dance room at Valencia Middle School. You'll also find that in one of the boys' basketball locker rooms and Las Vegas High School, as well as the wrestling bathrooms. So we're seeing how it goes in different types of spaces and how well we're able to maintain those.
And so far, we're pleased with it? Do we have a
Yes.
warranty on it?
It's a standard 1-year construction warranty. There is a manufacturer warranty. I don't know what that is on the actual product, but I can get that information to Dr. Kettler.
Mr. Vickers, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Mrs. Otero?
No.
Mr. Bennett?
Thank you for your report, appreciate it.
Thank you, Brandon. Dr. Kettler, item E3.
Madam President, members of the board, Chief Finance Officer Sandy Tracek will share a budget finance report, and then I'm going to ask her to remain at the podium as number 4 under the same topic. She will have an audit committee report also.
Okay, Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Kettler. So we're getting towards the end of this fiscal year. And so it is good to kind of reflect at where we are looking as the revenue coming in to the district towards the end of the year. And then we'll also look at the expenses. So on the graph, we have, starting from July, you have each month, a year-to-date of the revenue that's been received in. And the very last bar is what I had budgeted, estimating the amount of money that I expect to receive coming in. So you can see it keeps going on the incline. We have our, SEG that comes into our operational, which is, a guarantee to receive each month the amount, and we have one more month to receive this. This graph is as of May, ending in May. And with one more month to receive in June of the $8.7 million will put us over the budgeted amount. So we are comfortable in knowing that by the end of the year, we will for sure receive the revenue that was budgeted for, at least. So the next graph down shows actual year-to-date expenses. Same thing, starting in July, looking at year-to-date, so July through May. I have a year-to-date of 83,339,436 and a budget of 126,672,303. So that is actually everything that has either been paid out as payroll or AP checks, everything that has gone out for sure. Not all the expenses that will happen. For example, people who contracts that work in June have not been paid out yet, but they are what we call encumbered for, and that will be on the next graph. So the next graph actually has the year-to-date expenses of everything like check has actually been cut, plus the encumbrances, which are open purchase orders and open contracts. So someone whose contract who has not been totally paid out will still be paid some expenses in June. And so you can see on that, we have a year date of 100,576,186 with a budget of 126,694,637, which leaves us with the remaining 26,186,000. I do want to mention on this, I actually did this one day and then I did the other report that we'll be looking at. I had taken something out because I kind of wanted to give you a truer picture of what is really truly left at this point in operational, because there is a large purchase order that has been put in place that is meant for next year. So we have it come July 1st, it'll be ready. So, so I'll show you that on the next slide. The other. Okay, this one, the state of finances. So this is every single fund that we have budget authority with the PED to be able to spend. So we cannot spend any money until the state gives us budget authority. So this is on our OBMS system of what we are allowed to have. And the first one you see is operational. And on this report, you can see the budget and then what we have spent and what we have obligated, which means what's encumbered and the balance remaining. On this one, you see another $2 million difference from the last report that we had, because on this one, I tried to give you a little more truer picture. When normally I put encumbrances, there are some encumbrances that may, you might have a purchase order that's open that might actually be paid, say in July. But the majority of them, will be paid out in this year. So there's a big purchase for our insurance. That's millions of dollars. So I took that out because it will not for sure hit this current fiscal year. And that way you can kind of see the truer balance is actually the 28 million instead of 26. And then again, there are, if you look down this whole list, we have two funds that are, they are red, they are in the negative, and those are expected funds that I always realize that operational will have to pick this up at the end of the year. I keep the expense on how it truly is hitting, like for one is transportation. We always know that we spend more in transportation than we receive. And so that is just something that we have to budget for in operational. But we actually code the expenses the way they hit, so we have an idea of how much transportation truly cost us. And it won't be until we are finally, when we are finalizing, that it will move all the expenses that are negative. So in that 28 million, it will have to cover that negative in transportation and also in the child care block grant. So you can kind of go through some of these funds, gives you an idea of the percentages that are remaining. Some of them, and there's some in there that are even at 100%, and that's because something that it's perhaps like a project with our DOT project that Tiffany had just mentioned, hasn't started and hasn't been paid yet, so, but it will carry over into the next year. Any questions on that part of finances? Okay, I do want to also mention, since we are on the subject of finances, I believe you have already been made aware of the fact that we received an increase to our initial unit value. It is going up 111 and 20 cents. The unit value was at 6,442.55. It has been increased to 6,553.75, which is a 111.2 increase. And so that is multiplied by all, in I don't know if you call the SEG calculation, where we look through how revenue is calculated. All of those program units in total at the end came out to 15,570. Multiplying that by the additional 111 comes to $1,731,448 that we will be able to borrow into our 24-25 budget in operational. I don't at this time have for you how that will be distributed without, which account numbers it will hit. We'll be doing that bar. We're able to do it starting in July. So at that time, I'll be bringing that to finance and it'll go to board, the bar, on how that'll be coded. However, at this point, we all know that next year's budget, there was going to be a large cut into our cash reserves. And so I'm just anticipating that this money will just reduce the cut into our cash. Any questions on that? Thank you very much. Okay. The next thing I have is just to talk about our audit committee meeting. Last Tuesday, we had our audit entrance meeting with our auditors from JAG. And they kind of went over just what can be expected, talked about the list that they are going to provide, asking some of the initial questions. We, of course, I have not finished this fiscal year. However, they can review the internal controls that we have and kind of, last year versus this year. Have there been any type of administration changes? And kind of like, I'm new into this position, so what am I doing versus what I did before and stuff like that. So those are some of the things that they are going over in this initial review They are actually here this week, so they came in Monday and they will be here until Friday, but they have Wednesday off, as we do. So we have received their list of requests that they had mentioned that they were going to post on their portal. And we have been working a lot on those requests and have provided quite a few information already on that. So we are off to a good start and it has already started. So. Any questions on audit? Mr. Vickers, any questions?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Otero?
No,
Mr. Bennett?
Thank you.
Very comprehensive, thank you.
Yeah.
Wait, what about our auditors? Do we have to have a new auditor this year because the company that presented to us in the spring, something about a rotation?
We do not, we are not at the maximum yet.
Okay,
And so, but we do plan to go out next year.
so we have one more year with that same auditing company. Okay,
Correct.
okay,
I think we could even go more if, I think we still have maybe 1 year that we could, but we are gonna go ahead and just go out, not anything for that reason, just to put it out and see what kind of responses we get. And
Great.
that will be something that we work on with the audit committee.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Madam President, members of the board, we are inching closer to the 3-mill election, the all mail-in ballots. And what I can give you in terms of an update this evening is that postcards are being printed. The clerk's office is providing us with addresses of voters, and they are graciously going to eliminate households who have addresses for households that have multiple voters in that household, so we are not sending 3 postcards to the same house. I don't believe I said that correctly, but we are in an effort to save on our postage. We will only be sending 1 postcard per voting household. We are also exploring other options for advertising, and we are scheduled for an appearance on New Mexico Living in July to talk specifically about the 3-mill election and what it means for Los Lunas schools and instructional technology.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about the other options for the advertising, Dr. Keller?
So one option is the Starlight Theater Cinema. They are offering us very low cost advertising on their screens for the next month leading up to the election. Other options include the Valencia County News Bulletin. And we have not explored the Albuquerque Journal. It is rather expensive, and that's not our target audience. There should be signs going up on our campuses, or at least on the corners, and one out here by Special Services Building that's not there already.
Thank you very much.
Other comments under the superintendent's report? I had the pleasure of meeting with one of Raymond Gabaldon's sons last week, Dennis Gabaldon, who happens to also be one of our teachers in Los Lunas, about RGE. And the family's request, him and his brother's request, is that their father's name be maintained. First, they would like to have the building remain and repurposed. That's their very first ask of the district. If that is not possible, they are asking that the name be retained, used in some sort of memorial or in some other way in the district. And so during that conversation, I let Mr. Gabaldon know that I would be sharing that with the Board of Education this evening.
Where does Mr. Gabaldon teach at?
He teaches at Los Lunas Elementary School. He is a PE teacher and he has been at it for 40 years.
Wow.
And he told me he has the energy to go another 40. So, and I believe it. Also yesterday, I attended the Government Indian Education Summit in Farmington. It brings together the government officials from not only the state of New Mexico, but also all of our tribes and pueblos, as well as superintendents. It was well attended. We had several roundtables in which we were participated with more than Isleta. Basically all of the tribes, pueblos along the I-25 corridor from about Cochiti to Isleta. And I believe Laguna was in our group also. It was a very valuable experience. There are many pueblos, tribes experiencing great difficulties with their districts across the state that was expressed yesterday. However, Governor Zuni spoke up and was appreciative of the relationship that Los Lunas Schools has with Isleta. And while we have things that we can work on and improve on, he feels like our communication and our efforts with Isleta are very good and very strong, and he was appreciative. That is all I have on.
Are there any questions from any of the board members on any aspects of this? Mr. Vickers, any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Mrs. Otero?
No, thank you.
Mr. Bennett?
No.
I think I've asked my questions. Thank you very much. We are now on former item E, now item F, board commendations, and let's see, I'll ask Mr. Vickers, do you have any commendations or comments?
I do not.
Mrs. Otero?
No.
Mr. Bennett?
No.
I have two. One is the Los Lunas High School boys basketball team recently completed a community service project where they picked up trash along State Road 6 near the El Cerro de los Lunas trailhead. The pictures were amazing. 30, maybe 40 young men and their coaches out there performing a community service. It was awesome to see their community pride in the summer. And so I want to acknowledge and commend their efforts. Thought that was outstanding. The second one is Mr. Dominic Trujillo. He competed in the Red versus Green All-Star football game. He recently received a $1,000 scholarship from the NMAA for the Compete with Class Sportsmanship Scholarship. Apparently during the Red versus Green football game, he was the subject of many taunts and other unsportsmanlike behaviors, and he turned the other cheek and played with class and brings great pride to our district. And so I want to raise his name and congratulate him for his efforts. I think that was absolutely outstanding. On to item G, Mrs. Otero, do we have any persons who would like to address the board? Sorry, yes, do we have anybody?
You said Mrs.
Did I say Mrs. Otero? I'm sorry, my brain is over here. Thank you very much. No, that was mine. I apologize. Item H, items requested by the board members. The first one is the discussion with possible action about a format for the end of year evaluation of the superintendent and timeline for completion. The board received background information about the processes that have been used this past December for Dr. Kettler's review. He also has prepared a small presentation for us, which I will have him go over this. So, Dr. Kettler.
Madam President, members of the board, thank you. Mr. Schaaf, we are actually on G1. Do you want to go ahead and put G1 up there? It's F1 since the change, but G1 is what you have.
Right.
The PowerPoint specifically. Thank you, Mr. Schaaf. Madam President, members of the board, this is the timeline that was established last fall as I began my tenure as superintendent in Los Lunas. Following board policy C-600, the evaluation of the superintendent is to relate to the duties, responsibilities, and progress toward established goals. Those goals being that of the district established by the board. Superintendent provides the Board of Education members of a copy of the evaluation instrument. The evaluation takes place in executive session. A written evaluation is provided to the superintendent, and then it becomes part of the confidential personnel file, not personal file. This was done in December, and in a few slides here, I'll show you the timeline. There's a switch on the side. Yeah, it's. Can you advance it for me, Mr. Shaw? There we go. The language in my contracts states that the evaluation and assessment will occur in writing annually in December, which is in line with the board policy. It should be or will be based on goals established by the superintendent that are doable and measurable based on the board's goals and or strategic plan. And if determined, the Board of Education provides any unsatisfactory performance and gives guidance direction for that improvement. The timeline that was established is as follows: summer, early fall, so the July-August timeframe. The board and superintendent review the superintendent's job description and evaluation process, any forms, timelines, and possible supporting documents, information and data that would be used to measure performance. In addition, the superintendent creates goals based on the district goals, which are measurable and doable. Goals are mutually agreed upon by the board and superintendent, and then shared with staff. Quarterly, superintendent makes interim progress reports to the board on district goals and superintendent goals. This report will be made during a board work session. During the winter, specifically December, individual board members complete the evaluation forms and bring them to the evaluation session. Board members meet to discuss their evaluations in that session. The board's official evaluation documents are then shared, clarified, and discussed with the superintendent at a special meeting. Changes to the evaluation may be made as a result of the discussions. And then a copy of the final written evaluation form is placed in the superintendent's personnel folder. Then when we get to the spring, summer, specifically June, the superintendent reports on the progress of the district and those goals. And then the cycle starts over again. This past year, a 4-point Likert scale was used, with 1 being ineffective to 4 being highly effective. And you can sort of see there, it's all based on performance and evidence provided by superintendent, by me, to the board. I was scored this past year on the 7 Board of Education priorities. Governance and board relations is requested by former board member, Mr. Smith, as well as community relations and staff relations. My recommendations to the board as we begin this discussion is to maintain the previously established timeline. As the December time matches what's in my contract in terms of when that final evaluation is done, as well as the potential for contract extensions. Use the same rating scale. It's pretty simple. Replace the current BOE priorities with goals from the strategic plan, and utilize a 360-degree survey, which was not previously done, to provide feedback to the Board of Education, to you all. Now, this would not be used in terms of scoring this feedback, but it would be used as a discussion tool between the Board of Education and the superintendent to aid in setting professional development goals or growth goals. That is all I have on evaluation and timeline tonight.
Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
On the quarterly, we didn't do it in February, to my knowledge, right?
We had one, yeah, we did.
I don't remember that, one. I'm just.
I can share that with the board again, the presentation.
I believe, Mr. Bennett, the one that we were concerned about was May, but we were in budget crisis mode. So we postponed the May report.
That is,
So we still will need to talk about when that can come up, but we'll talk about a schedule here in a moment. Are there any questions or concerns that we want to raise at this time? This was really to just provide some background information, give the board members plenty of time to read and process, be able to think about what's coming up in front of us so we can take this matter seriously and be well informed and well prepared. Mr. Vickers, do you have any comments or concerns or questions at this time?
I do not this time.
Okay, Mrs. Otero, any comments, questions, or concerns at this time?
No.
Okay. Mr. Bennett, other than the first question, do you have any additional?
No.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kettler. Item H2 or former G2?
thank you, Mr. Schaaf. Madam President, members of the board. This is the first of two presentations here, back to back on evaluating specific programs that Los Lunas Schools currently uses. This one is specific to our digital learning and academic coaches. I wanted to just give a brief background. There it goes. On academic coaches. Coaches are experienced educators who provide guidance, support, and professional development to the teachers they work with. The goal is improving instruction and creating more effective learning environments for our students. They also serve as collaborative partners, working with teachers to identify areas for improvements, develop strategies for the classroom, and implement change. And in addition, they are supportive mentors, providing guidance and support to teachers to foster positive and encouraging learning environments and cultures on school campuses. The key responsibilities of instructional coaches are observation and feedback. They're to be observing classrooms to identify areas for improvement, provide constructive feedback, guide teachers in implementing evidence-based practices, to deliver professional development, to offer those opportunities for teachers, keeping them updated on the latest research and best practices in education. And then also curriculum alignment. They ensure that teachers are implementing the curriculum effectively and that it aligns with standards and student needs. Our coaches have also worked on our maps and timelines to keep things moving along. And so currently they're serving a pretty big role. Improving instructional practices, coaches work with teachers to identify strategies such as differentiated instruction, tailoring that instruction to meet the diverse learning needs of our students, ensuring that all students can thrive. This past year when we were in classrooms, with Ms. Otero and I were in classrooms, I remember one time that we were in a classroom that the teacher was working with a small group while the rest of the kids were in different centers doing self-guided learning or group learning. And so the coaches help teachers set up those routines and then monitor them and help them improve on those routines so they're most effective and it's not a waste of instructional time. Technology integration, and this is where the digital coaches come in, guiding teachers in integrated technology effectively into the classrooms to enhance learning experiences. And then again, collaborative learning, fostering a culture of collaboration, encouraging teachers to work together. You will find the instructional coaches, academic coaches, and digital coaches oftentimes in professional learning communities with teachers. By improving instructional practices, coaches contribute directly to enhancing student learning outcomes, ensuring all students achieve their full potential. And so we want to improve student engagement. We want to increase student achievement, and we want to have both of those things lead to greater student motivation. And as a result, enhance critical thinking skills, improve problem-solving abilities, and increase student confidence. Again, coaches support teacher professional development through mentorship, workshops and training. That's the professional learning, professional development piece, and collaborative learning. I don't want to belabor that too much. Coaches they play a crucial role in fostering collaborative learning environments, that open communication that teachers desperately need, that's safe, where they can freely discuss the challenges they're facing and the problems they're having, and get support, not only from the coach, but also other peers. They share resources, provide access to shared resources, including lesson plans, teaching materials, different online platforms, and then peer coaching. So the coaches encourage peer coaching, where teachers observe each other's classrooms and provide constructive feedback to improve practices. Now there's several things, about 5, that are important when we're measuring impact. One is accountability. We have limited resources and time, money, and effort. And so we want to make sure that those resources are being utilized in the best possible way for the best possible outcomes. Data-informed decision-making. Coaching strategies and interventionists need to be aligned to data and grounded in research. Teacher professional growth and student achievement. Improving teachers' instruction will increase student achievement and outcomes. Continuous improvement allows coaches to refine practices, improve professional learning efforts, better meet teachers' needs, enhance student learning outcomes. And then advocacy and support. Evidence of coaching impacts demonstrates the value and supports investment. When we talk about academic return on investment, that is the practice of scientifically evaluating the cost effectiveness of academic programs and then deciding where to allocate the resources accordingly. It's a structured approach to getting the most bang for our buck. It can be ROI can help district answer questions such as what works, who's it working for, and what's the cost. And while it may be sounds like a pretty simple concept or question, it requires a deeper look at analyzing mastery for learning objectives, growth over time, direct and indirect costs, cash and time, educational needs, specific actionable groupings. And so those all fall under different parts of the academic return on investment cycle. The process itself is number one, to look at the program and what the investment is. Number two, ask the questions. Are students served by the program growing faster than they would have grown without the program? Number three, create a personalized growth projection for each student, assuming the program did not exist before, so that you can track that, but we've had coaches, so that one's a little more difficult. Then compare observed growth for each student with the program, projected growth without the program. And then 5 is to act, validate program effectiveness using results to improve the program or consider reallocating resources to other programs. There's some bit of research or literature on beyond academic return as the investment, specifically because the outcomes of academic coaching are complex and multifaceted. There's really no one size fits all approach to measuring the coaching impact. Whatever data is collected needs to encompass both qualitative and quantitative data because you can't really rely on just one of those. There's other things that we need to consider, contextual factors, unintended consequences. And so what I would, see that slide yet. Ways to measure the coaching impact then is student achievement data, is quantitative, teacher surveys and feedback, which you can quantify with numbers, but more qualitative. Classroom observations, teacher reflection and self-assessment, longitudinal data, peer collaboration and coaching feedback, and then case studies of teacher growth through the coaching cycles. The way that I want to evaluate the effectiveness of our digital learning and academic coaches is to, during the August timeframe, develop and finalize actionable evaluation plans with digital learning and academic coaches and obtain baseline data, as well as establishing our data collection instruments. And then around the 1st of September, begin data collection, which would run about 6 months, getting us to the end of February, taking roughly a month if needed to do the analysis, and then deliver an evaluation report in April on the effectiveness of the program, which lines up, I believe, with budgeting season. And that's all I have on that presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Keller. Do we have any questions from the board? Mr. Vickers, do you have any questions or things you would like to raise?
Yeah, is this the first school year that we have used coaches this past school year?
Coaches have been used, this is my understanding, coaches have been used on and off for quite a long time, maybe 10 or more years. When budgeting has taken a hit, we've seen a drop off in the number of coaches, but it was prioritized that we bring coaches back in the numbers that they are now. So 1 for every school, 6 digital coaches, et cetera. So they have been used. I cannot speak to the consistency of their use. For example, this year they were stationed out of a central location, which was very difficult, one for the coaches and not beneficial to the schools. So we made the switch. Each coach is assigned to a school and will work with that principal, assistant principal, administrative team, and they will be housed there. They will be there. And so they will be on those campuses more present, more often.
My understanding from budget talks, are these coaches paid for through Title I?
That is correct.
So they're not coming out of operational? Okay.
Prior to budgeting season, part of their salaries were out of operational, but we moved them all into federal funds for this coming school year.
Just from a little bit of interaction I've had with coaches in various open houses, including the one in Valencia High School, and some workshops here, and hearing from it, it just seems like they're really valuable. You know, that's all anecdotal, but it just seems like the teachers no longer are set to be solo and on their own. They've actually got some help It just seems like it kills two birds with one stone with the teacher mentoring and help, and then direct student help also at the same time. So it seems to me that it's a really good concept and beneficial.
Member Vickers, I would also add that as we see teachers enter their twilight years of education and teaching and begin retiring, we're replacing them with young, brand new people straight out of colleges or some out of the workforce who go through an alternative licensure program, and they need a lot of support, a lot more support as they begin their journey in education and teaching. And so coaches really fill that role in a big way.
It sounds good. So I'll be looking forward to the reporting at the end of this coming school year. Thank you.
Mrs. Otero, any questions or comments?
No, I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, so is this the first year you're gonna be evaluating them, or should that been evaluated prior year? Because if that's the case, then why are we at the 30% and they should have already came together and figured out how we're gonna change student success?
So, Member Bennett, Madam President, coaches have always been evaluated on the three-tier licensure system through NMPED, which is separate than what I'm proposing here. What I'm proposing here is evaluating the program as a whole for effectiveness, because the concern that has been raised to me this spring was exactly what you said. Why is our reading proficiencies so low?
Well,
Why is our
exactly,
math proficiency so
especially if
low?
we're adding more coaches and that the numbers are still below.
That is, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kettler. So there are a couple of questions. So on slide 13, you have a bullet point, teacher surveys and feedback, which is qualitative. Teacher surveys can be quantitative. Do you have an
Correct.
instrument in mind?
I have not explored the instruments at this time.
Okay. And the feedback would be qualitative?
Correct.
Okay. I think one of the concerns that I have, in addition to wanting to make sure that the program is effective, because we do not have the proficiency in this district that we should be having. And several of us in the spring raised various levels of concern about the academic proficiency. Some of the comments I've heard, who are not, just going to put them out there so that we can deal with it head on, is that in many instances, the instructional coaches become adjunct site administrators, if you will, or counselors. And neither, not that they're not beneficial, but neither of those are instructional functions. So what kind of assurances do you have that the instructional coaches will be doing truly instructional coaching and not assisting with administrative functions or counseling functionings?
Madam President, members of the board, we, when Mr. Talley motioned to add those assistant principals back in, we eliminated any thought of having instructional coaches on standby for administration or administrative responsibilities. And so each school, with the exception of Peralta, has a principal and assistant principal. And so the instructional coach will not be used in that way. In terms of using them in counseling situations, I'm unaware of any such incident, as it has never been brought to my attention. However, I will say that personnel has been working really hard with special services to make sure we are fully staffed with counselors and social workers. And so it's, I guess what I would say is, I know we're in a different time and time period, but my word would be that my instruction to the school sites would be that the coaches are coaching only, and they're not serving in those other capacities.
Thank you very much. That was item H2, item H3. Dr. Kettler?
Madam President, members of the board, this is the second presentation on evaluating program effectiveness. And this one is specific to our school resource officers program. We have a very robust school resource officer program. In fact, I believe it was the first in the state, and I think APS even modeled its program after what we were doing in Los Lunas. This past year, our school resource officers received national recognition because they achieved the triad concept of school-based policing. And so I believe, get to this on one of my other slides, but I did want to start with that. There is an extensive history going back to the 1950s in the use of SROs, and I won't go through all the research, but the first known usage was when SROs were permanently assigned to schools in 1953 in Flint, Michigan. And in 1954, the Supreme Court held in Brown versus the Board of Education that school segregation was unconstitutional and mandated public school desegregation. And as many schools refused to do this, it required federal military intervention. But when the police presence was there, the military was not required. And so that was sort of the start of it. It's expanded and changed over the years, and it's been a steady increase across the U.S. The point that we're at today. A school resource officer is a career law enforcement officer with sworn authority, deployed in community-oriented policing, assigned by the employing police department or agency, in our case, Los Lunas Schools, to work in collaboration with schools. They're actually our employees, commissioned by Los Lunas Police Department, but assigned in our schools. They're commissioned law enforcement officers trained to work within the school community. They are carefully selected. And I will say, having worked in other places, we have a luxury because we do have carefully selected commissioned law enforcement officers. Other places tend to have armed security guards, which you could go to work at AJF and get a level 4, I believe, certification is what it's called, to carry a firearm. They're not law enforcement officers, they're security guards with guns. And so our SROs are specially trained following the National Association of School Resource Officers best practices. The goal of a well-rounded SRO program includes providing a safe learning environment, providing resources for school staff members, fostering positive relationships with youth, developing strategies to resolve problems affecting youth, protecting all students so they can reach their full potential. The triad concept, which we won the award for, defines the roles of the SROs in this way. Number 1, educator. Number 2, informal counselor mentor. And number 3, law enforcement officer. Some guiding principles for SRO programs. SROs should not be involved in school discipline. That's not their function. That's why we have school administrators with administrative licenses. They should be judicious in the use of their law enforcement powers. They should go through a specialized hiring process, which we have, a tailored performance evaluation and supervision, specialized training, student and family engagement. They should have an annual program assessment, and that's what we're talking about today, so that's why that's in bold. Duty assignments, they should be fixed with one or a limited number of schools, and this is the recommendation from the U.S. Department of Justice and their community-oriented policing services. And then they should have a community of practice and professional support. On the next slide, the role of an SRO is broken down a little bit more. Again, from the U.S. Department of Justice, they're a law enforcer. They promote safety. They serve as a liaison between the school and outside agencies. They are mentors, building relationships, fostering positive behaviors, connecting youth to services when needed. They're educators, and our SROs do teach in classes often, and they collaborate with different groups. And then there are emergency managers. Should something happen, they are the ones who have developed and implemented comprehensive safety plans and strategies with school administration and local first responders. So the goals of the SRO program is to get, according to the National Association of School Resource Officers, is to bridge the gap between police officers and young people, increase positive attitudes towards law enforcement, teach the value of our legal system, promote respect for people and property, and reduce juvenile delinquency by helping students formulate an awareness of rules, authority, and justice. Some of the training that they receive, and it's all through the National Association of School Resource Officers, is basic SRO courses, advanced SRO courses, SRO managements, for those who would be a lead, SRO response to active shooter situations, crime prevention, and school law. There are many proven benefits of SRO programs, and that is really, really difficult to read, so I apologize. Number one, prevention or minimization of property damage in the school and surrounding areas. Prevention of student injuries due to violence, drug overdoses, etc. Number three, reduction in the need for schools to call 911, reduction in the likelihood that a student will get a criminal record, increase the likelihood that students will get help from social service and healthcare systems. And then number six, increase the feelings of safety among staff and students. So as we look at evaluating our SRO program, I'm recommending a little bit different approach than with our academic coaches and digital coaches. I view this in the same timeline, but in three distinct phases. Phase one, August and September, researching SRO programs and comparing what we do here to other models, both statewide and nationally. And then reviewing the issues that Los Lunas Schools faces and where the SROs fit, what their role is in terms of fitting into those issues we face and resolving those issues. Phase two, running October to January, is to conduct the surveys of students, parents, guardians, staff, SROs themselves, community, including local counties and state law enforcement agencies, hold community meetings for input, and then do some data collection on our attendance, discipline, and service referrals. But again, phase one is important here because we need to identify the role of our SROs and separate that from things that they are not responsible for, or should not be responsible for. And then phase three is to analyze all of that data that's been collected in phase two, develop any recommendations, and make a report to the board around the same time frame as the academic coaches and digital coaches.
Thank you, Dr. Kettler. Any questions from the board? Mr. Vickers?
I think it's a valuable program, and under slide 4, I guess it is, what's the goal of the SRO program? The first sentence is providing safe learning environments in schools, and I think that's a really valuable goal right there. You need somebody there that can be a first responder, basically. I mean, if you have an event at the Bosque Farms Community Center of more than 50 people, you have to hire security or they won't rent to you. And so, you know, this just makes sense. You have school with 400 kids, and then the staff. You need somebody there that can be a first responder. So I think it's a very important role. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Mrs. Otero?
I agree with what Mr. Vickers said. It's very important.
Mr. Bennett?
I have a question, and this might be to Mr. Bach, if I could ask him. Did we upgrade our SRO policy? Because I remember we went to this new policy and there was a lot of stuff that wasn't in it that pertained to us. Was that ever upgraded?
For MOUs, so it is a lot of process, it's not just a. So we have had we have added. And
Yeah, well, so I was curious because we haven't seen nothing come around here because I know the board has to approve policy. So I was just wondering if there's any updates that we need to visit it and make sure they're in there.
so we bring that.
Officer Garcia, can you go to the podium? While he's on his way, clarify between policy and procedures.
Well, policy is the board policy.
Correct.
And what
Are
I'm
you,
thinking
you're
Mr. Baca might be saying is procedures. what they do.
procedures?
And I think we have a board policy that has certain things that we do, can and can't do with children and other things. You know, understand what I'm saying, Busy.
Yeah, members of the board, Dr. Sosky, Dr. Kettler, we have an ongoing standard operational procedure that we live by. And it's updated regularly. It's current and it's up to date. We'd love to get you a copy of that if you'd like to have a copy of that. I don't know how it applies to the board policy, but it's current and up to date, which includes the lead officers as well.
And that's current,
Yes, ma'am.
that's current practice or procedures. That is,
Yes, ma'am.
and, okay, so Mr. Bennett's question is, have we updated the board policy? Have you been working on updates to the board policy? Because the board has not seen one of those, and we've got a date coming up, so we could give you a heads up about this date, and maybe if you have an updated policies recommendation, it could be presented at that date.
We would love to provide that information to you. I don't know what is in the board policy specifically, because we do maintain our own department procedures. So if it needs to be updated, Mr. Baca and myself, we'll prepare something for you.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, I know we've got a procedure, but I think it's probably a work session we need to have where we can go together and see exactly what's in the policy and anything that needs to be changed or added. It'd be beneficial to everybody.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bennett pointed out one topic that I was curious about, and then Dr. Kettler, you addressed a concern that I had, and it was on slide 5 about SRO should not be involved in school discipline. I know that over the spring budget workshops, as we began discussing different possibilities for budget cuts, I received some community comments about the concern for, I don't know if this is true, but it's a fair concern, so I think we should include this in the evaluation. Current subject of social policy research is the school to prison pipeline. And a concern that quite possibly we could be contributing because we have higher numbers of adjudication. So maybe that is something you could add to your evaluation protocols so that we could be looking at that. I would hate for that to be something that inadvertently happens when we have good intentions. There are no other questions? On to the next one. Thank you, Dr. Kettler. And number 4, please, 8-4.
Madam President, members of the board, at the last meeting that we had, which I believe was a special meeting, we discussed Raymond Gavaldon Elementary School. Before the board meeting and a work session. And then when we got to the meeting, there was no presentation ready. So I want to run back a few of these slides from that work session that I should have presented during the open meeting. We've seen this a lot over the last few weeks. The current map of our elementary school boundaries showing that there is two slivers, so to speak, in the Meadow Lake area that are carved out. One sliver goes to Valencia Elementary, the other goes to Raymond Gobaldon Elementary. As we have been awarded design phase funding for Ann Parish Elementary, we have to, when that school is completed, we have to fill that school with the 525 to 540 students as is required for the funding that we've received. To do so, Visions and Planning, through their work with our data and our addresses, determines that those two slivers should just go to Ann Parish Elementary School. There is another effect that potentially could happen, and that is Valencia Elementary has a little sliver in their area that currently attends RGE, but we really have not discussed that at this point. There was some early implementation of rezoning that we've talked about, and the questions that have come up: what procedures will we implement as part of the process to reduce our N transfers, those kids in our district that transfer to another school, to less than 15%, because we know from the data, many students across all schools transfer out to their home from their home attendance zone to attend a school somewhere else. What procedures or policies will we have in place, and where should they attend? As we work to implement zone changes, if we do this early, we need to make sure that our transfer policy for students is tight, and so that we eliminate our issues with the in transfers. And the other thing is we need to consider what do we do with those students who already have transfers to other elementary schools. In reality, all new sibling transfer requests would need to be denied to return students and families to their home schools. A phased approach should be considered, and this is from Visions and Planning, for implementing stronger transfer policies over the next 2 years to minimize disruption and changes for students and families, allowing them to gradually return to their home schools over the next 2 years. There's also the potential for vacating RGE too soon, but I'm going to talk a little bit more when I get to the timeline, because I don't think that is actually a possibility, vacating RGE too soon. And then, what are we going to do with that pre-K award? And again, not considering vacating that campus too early. The elementary zone changes should be done in tandem with secondary boundary changes to minimize disruption to feeder patterns. And then there was a concern by Visions and Planning about the negative impact on the upcoming mill levy election. So the impacts: Ann Parish would gain 112 students roughly by taking those two little slivers that are currently in Meadow Lake and sending those students to Ann Parish. Valencia Elementary loses 65 students, but again, they would gain 6 students because that little sliver of RGE potentially would then just be absorbed by Valencia Elementary. The big issues at hand are Los Lunas Elementary. They do not have sufficient capacity to accommodate RGE students. That is assuming a full closure of RGE, and their functional capacity is currently at 504. Their current enrollment is 453. And if you count the 184 students in the RGE boundary that attend RGE, so the kids that live there and go there, should go there, the total enrollment would balloon at Los Lunas Elementary if RGE was to be closed to 637 students. Now, there are currently 128 in transfers. 28 of those are from Belen Consolidated Schools. 34 students from the RGE boundary currently attend LLE. So in doing the math, if you denied the remaining 94 in transfers, right, you reduce the total that you would be moving from RGE to LLE to 543. And that's if you closed RGE and completely change that boundary to it becoming LLEs. And remember, the current functional capacity is 504. So there were some recommendations from Vision and Planning, adopt the proposed attendance zone changes as they will have the most long-term impact on providing Los Lunas schools with cohesive elementary attendance zones. Prior to the final implementation of the proposed attendance zone changes in their current form, they will do an updated geocode analysis, which would be done in the spring prior to the opening of the new Ann Parish School. So we're talking 3 years out, which would be 26, 27. 26, actually, yeah, 25, 26, 26, 27. So any final adjustments could be made based on capacities and where students and families are living. Update the transfer policy to meet our needs. Reconstruct Ann Parish for a capacity of 540 students, which we're again underway with that. Replace Raymond Gobbledon Elementary with a new pre-K center to accommodate up to 160 students at its current location or at another school site. So again, and I don't want to keep belaboring this, but the classrooms at Raymond Gobbledon, just from a square footage perspective, are not adequate. And the main building cannot be, that it just can't be expanded to meet those square footage requirements. And so replacement of the school is really the only option there. Construct a 13 classroom addition plus ancillary spaces at Los Lunas Elementary to replace existing portables and provide sufficient classroom space to accommodate increased enrollment. So if RGE completely closed, those students are going to go to LLE, and again, currently they do not have the capacity, even with the few portables that they do have on campus. If we moved ancillary staff out of those, then they would have to go somewhere also. So it's a problem that sort of compounds itself. And again, a minor change to the boundary between Valencia and Los Lunas may be needed to reduce those numbers of classrooms to be constructed at Los Lunas Elementary, because as we all know, cost and time, even on a 13 classroom wing, is pretty great. So my recommendations in that work session were to move forward with the constructing of Ann Parish, which will be 3 years roughly from receiving funding for design, which we have now received that funding from the PSCOC. The approval of the preliminary boundary study that the board approved based on the geocoding on May 7th was the first step in pushing us over the edge and getting that design funding. And so that was a very important step. Second, follow the recommended timeline suggested by Visions and Planning, adjusting dates for 3 years out to meet the reality of construction. I recommend that Cabinet and Facilities review the pre-K award for RGE with PSFA. Allow me to present the options after that for RGE to the Board of Education in a work session, and have Visions and Planning present an updated boundary for the secondary schools, so that any necessary changes can be made to minimize disruption in feeder patterns. Now, this is, again, I apologize, this is, really hard to, see, but this is the timeline that I believe, we need to follow and make sense for us. So the very first activity is meet with Visions and Planning to identify all options for RGE. Because based on the geocoding and the numbers, Pauline has requested a meeting this month or in July with cabinets and with facilities to discuss what she sees as the options based on housing, based on where our families live currently, based on our space, our capacities, et cetera. After that meeting, Ms. McMinn, our Director of Facilities, is scheduling a meeting for July, August timeframe with the PSFA to review all those options for RGE. Because remember, they're the ones that are gonna be funding us, at least part of it, for whatever the outcome is or whatever the design is. Again, we are going out. We have the RFP request for proposal going out for APE, hopefully by the end of this month. But if not, it should be early in July. That could take up to a couple of months, or 3 months. We're looking at July through September. Visions and Planning can make a presentation to the Board of Education on secondary boundaries in August and September. Around the same time frame, September, October, I would present the options for RGE after meeting with Visions and Planning and PSFA to the Board of Education for a decision. Once a decision is made, I believe then community meetings to inform on the process and gather input is appropriate. Because there are only so many options that we can do with RGE. And if we do that in reverse order, there will be a lot of options that just aren't realistic or actual options. The Ann Parish design phase, hopefully a cost time analysis could be done in the February timeframe so that we know what's going to happen at Ann Parish. So if, for example, if the architects come back and say it's better to rebuild the current building rather than a new build, we have students that we're going to have to move around during construction and displace those kids. At that point, we'll have a better idea if we can actually move those 112 students that are at RGE to Ann Parish. If they come back and say, you need a complete new building, we're gonna build it adjacent to the old building, that changes things. And there's probably closer capacity to moving those students early. The design phase will hopefully start in Ann Parish and run through October through June. And hopefully sometime in those first 3 months, 4 months, the architects can give us the cost and time frame analysis so that the board can then make a serious decision or about whether or not to move those students early. I agree we need to establish working committees. But I believe this is something that we need to do after we have a better idea of what the construction at Ann Parish is going to look like specifically, and what the plan for RGE is. A lot of this depends on the architects. A lot of it depends on PSFA. And again, a lot of it depends on the outcome of the Ann Parish design. I do recognize that it's the desire of the board to move those students as soon as possible. But I do want to caution us to make sure that we don't create issues a year from now if it comes back that the existing building just needs remodeled. And now we've got 112 additional students that we need to move around during construction, because it is an inconvenience to staff and students, even at a school with a smaller enrollment like Peralta. I stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vickers, any questions?
Just, I guess suggestions, under the activity chart, you have one, two, three, 5 lines down. Present options for RGE to the Board of Education for decision. I would hope that we have workshops in advance of that and not just get it handed to us at a board meeting. That we listen to all the pros and cons and that we can formulate a decent decision prior to the actual action at a board meeting.
Mr. Vickers, members of the board, I had blocked off 2 months time in there for that exact reason. I will update the chart to reflect that work sessions ahead of any board meeting when action would be taken.
Okay, thank you. That's all I've got.
Mrs. Otero, any questions?
No, thank you for your presentation.
Mr. Bennett? A couple of questions. Yes, thank you for the presentation. I'm really kind of concerned on slide 4 about siblings and new sibling transfer requests. I think that one of the things when we have a work session on this, I know I would like to see some information, more information about the number of siblings that we have. I know that we can't know how many siblings exactly, but that might be interested, but I think that that is something that we need to be very cognizant of. And I'm seeing some confusion here between the impact of the RGE pre-K award, or I'm sorry, so I'm looking at slide 5. So the stronger transfer policies, which goes along with my concern I just mentioned, allowing students to return to their home schools over the next 2 years. So I think that those 2 bullets being connected, we need to have a better understanding of what it would look like for students to transfer back, and especially with this sibling thing. I know that's kind of circular. The next thing is the pre-K award. I know we have very briefly, kind of more as a cursory conversation, talked about some options for that pre-K award. So it would be nice to nail that down just a little bit farther. I think those are my two concerns, is the sibling transfer and then the transfer policy. And I agree with Mr. Vickers to definitely have some work sessions before so that we can properly announce those and have community input. Thank you very much. Item H5, Superintendent's Quarterly Report. Status of the strategic plan.
Madam President, members of the board, so we will have a more in-depth report in July, because I know, Mr. Bennett, you brought up May, or Dr. Osowski. So I want to just mention a few data points first, and they are high level, and I recognize that. We need to do more in-depth analysis with our data, and to the point that we know where our students are struggling, specific skills, standards, et cetera. But for the purposes of tonight, I wanted to share just a few graphs from the end of the year. Our kindergarten through second grade iStation outcomes. So the percent of students proficient according to iStation benchmarks. At the beginning of the year, we had about 39% of our students. When we got to the end of the year, it was 42%. And I put in the little blue boxes what the changes were last year. But I would say that comparing this year's kindergarten students to last year's kindergarten students is somewhat apples and oranges, right? They're different students, different kids. First grade, we did see a dip district-wide, 33 to 26. Second grade increased by one point, 30 to 31. When you go to math, we saw what I would consider many more students reaching proficiency measures, okay, in the 6 primary domains of mathematical reasoning and processes. So that's our number sense, operations, algebra, geometry, measurement, and data analysis type things. So kinder went 33 to 63, first grade 35 to 61, and second grade 19 to 24. When we shift to third through sixth grade and we move from iStation to iMassa, what we're looking at is how many students are making end of year or meeting end of year expectations. This is more of a measure of proficiency. And so the reading assessments here are designed to provide reliable and valid scores in the comprehension and analysis and interpretation of text areas. But from the beginning of the year, so about 14% of students, right? But by the end of the year, we saw 36% of students meeting end of year expectations. In fourth grade, by the end of the year, 43% of students. It stayed the same at fifth grade from the beginning of the year to now, or the end of the year. And in sixth grade, we also saw a little increase in the number of students meeting expectations. In terms of math, third grade, we saw a lot of many more students meet those expectations by the end of the year. Same with fourth grade. Fifth grade, you can see in sixth grade, we're nearly half of our students meeting those expectations. And the mathematical practices are and concepts are problem solving, logical and quantitative reasoning, evaluation of arguments, modeling, and those sorts of things. When we get to seventh grade, we had many students. We had 41% of students in seventh grade and 31% making end of year expectations. Again, this is more of a measure of proficiency. And I would like to just add that this was backing up to reading. This was really the first year that we've had full implementation of our curriculums. We piloted Amira last year. Amplify was in its second year. Haggerty was in its first year. So in year one, the goal was introduction of the curriculum so the teachers could learn it, get to know it, become familiar with it. Year two was continued implementation focus. And as we begin to transition to year three, we're going to be focusing on the improvement of the quality of instruction using that curriculum. It's the operational piece. And so I expect to see even better gains and growth next year specific to reading. Seventh and eighth grade math, again, we saw 32% of our students from 18 in seventh grade and 14 to 25 in eighth grade. Again, this is just really high level data. High schools are still working on their Horizons data as well as SAT and the New Mexico Assessment of Science Readiness. I am still waiting for my Horizons account to be activated. And so I wasn't able to prepare any data for high school. Okay, the strategic plan. A real quick updated timeline. When I started on August 14th, I had goals for my first week. I had goals for my next 18 weeks, 21 weeks, at which point in January, my 100-day plan expired. During that course of that first 9 weeks or so, after visiting with people, lots of staff, it rose to the top that we needed a strategic plan. And so during that time frame, I began on a strategic plan path using Loom as a partner. Last time I presented, I thought I would be done by the end of May with the strategic plan. But those phases have taken longer to complete, and I'll give you an updated timeline here in a minute. And so that last circle on that timeline is left open intentionally, but we will be completed by July 15th. Through this process of strategic planning, we wanted to develop a compelling, actionable, and measurable strategy for Los Lunas schools to align the current existing board priorities. We wanted to make sure we engaged students, families, educators, and staff, as well as stakeholders and supporters, be informed by research that's available, as well as any data that currently exists in the data or in the district. Communicate clearly the priorities, identify specific metrics and targets, which are currently working on and finishing up so that we have accountability and tracking, provide that accountability for activities and outcomes, and then provide a clear direction for the work and framework for the future, which would drive decision. Again, these are the phases that we've been following. Phase 1 was just diagnosing what we do, what our data is, what our stakeholders say about our strengths and areas of opportunities. Phase 2 was developing our priorities and theory of action. Phase 3, who are the people, resources, activities that we need to execute a plan. And then 4, 5, and 6 are where we've been with metrics, milestones. How are we going to launch this? And then how are we going to manage it? Make sure that we're on track. I'm not going to go through our mission and motto and vision at this point, but we wanted to make sure that I wanted to make sure and mention that there were several strengths that came out of the current state assessment. And so we want to make sure we're leveraging those things. So the priorities as they are for 24 through 29, because I did a 5-year strategic plan, which there's some research that says 5-year strategic plans are too long now and should be kept much shorter. But I wanted to build it out for 5 years. Our priorities were to build collaborative student-centered culture, build trust with families to serve as partners in students' academic learning, build systems, strategies, and capacity in our people to support strong instruction, which is where our instructional coaches fit, develop strong people systems to foster a strong student-centered culture. So looking at priority 1, there are some identified milestones that I have for you this evening. As we look at priority 1, there are 2 strategies. Number 1, to engage in a strategic planning process that includes a wide range of perspectives and is communicated to stakeholders. So the year 1, priority for year 1 is to engage just to do exactly that, right? We want to make sure that we share this strategic plan complete with the community. And I put a timeline. I think we can do it much sooner than September 30th, but I put an end date of September 30th on that priority. Second, develop comprehensive performance management routines and implement ongoing practice of monitoring and shepherding district culture. to ensure that our strategic plan creates focus, consistency, and alignment. Because it's that old image of everybody in the organization's arrows going the same direction. We don't want arrows going in all different directions. We want to be aligned, we want to be focused, and we want to be consistent. Okay, and so to do that, develop comprehensive performance management routines, which we are working on and will have in July for implementing the ongoing practice and monitoring of the strategic plan. Priority 2, build trust with families to serve as partners in their students' academic learning. Now, priority 2 has 4 main goals with it. Number 1, develop and implement evidence-based and comprehensive strategies for gathering, analyzing, and communicating, taking action on the ideas and feedback from families. And so the milestone will be collecting baseline data on whether parents feel LLS considers them partners in their children's education. I understand that there has been some concern around perception. And so I want to measure that more in depth, more specifically, and see exactly where our parents are. Create consistent, strategic, and tailored opportunities for families to engage with district leaders, campus leaders, and teachers, to include some flexibility. So develop school level family engagement plans. And I put an end date of June 30th on here, but because we are behind a little bit, that's gonna have to be adjusted to probably July 30th. Because I have not even discussed this yet with our school principals, our building administrators. Number 3, strengthen staff skill sets, practices, mindsets to communicate and engage with families. Train school leaders on family engagement expectations and vision. 4, strengthen, clearly communicate, and effectively implement a set of district-wide student and educator expectations and practices to include grading and attendance. Policies to be updated by the end of June 2025. I know, obviously, these policies are Board of Education policies, and so work sessions and board review, along with that, whatever timeline is developed by the board, plays into that also, that date. Priority 3, build systems and capacity to support strong instruction. And so design, communicate, and hold clear role-specific expectations and structures that prioritize school leaders, coaches, and educators, participation in coaching, professional development, and collaborative planning, such as PLCs. All schools have shared planning time, PLCs, for at least 60% of teachers and 90% of teachers' attendance. Provide all educators high-quality, user-friendly assessments and instructional materials, as well as supporting tools and support best practices for inclusive planning. Materials and assessment adoption, selection, timelines. We really need to, and I know that some of the curriculum's new, but do a full audit of our materials and assessments, especially our assessments. When I talked to Santa Fe Public Schools, they made a switch to iReady because the data that they were able to get out of that assessment was so much better than what the state offers. And it does come with a cost, but they were able to drill down more specifically for each kid and identify where their growth areas are. And so those are the sorts of things we need to do on the second goal of priority 3. The third goal on priority 3, build instructional leadership capacity to support school leaders and coaches in providing consistent, coherent, and actionable feedback to educators. I believe our administrators started on this in the last couple of years with their coaching and feedback cycles, and they've done a lot of work around that. But we can always improve, and we need to have a multi-year strategy for instructional leadership development and finalize that and share it with our instructional leaders. I think too often we have people going in different directions. And so we want to bring coherence to that and get everybody, again, going in the same direction and developing in the same way. Now, that does not mean it's a one size fits all, because some administrators are going to need a little more support as they build this out. And then last, build educator capacity is where educators in providing all students, including special populations, through an inclusion model, access to layer one instruction. We are a district that has started on the inclusion path. And so this coming school year, 6 of our schools will be implementing an inclusion model. And that equates to 40% of our schools. So we're going to meet that goal already. But those teachers in these schools need to be supported and the capacity developed to implement effectively the inclusion model and align that to best practices and expectations. With priority 4, develop strong people systems to foster a strong student-centered culture in Los Lunas schools. Now, there's 5 goals here. The first 2 will be focused on in year 1. Really looking at our centralized process and tools that we use to attract, select, and onboard high-quality educators and leaders. And so we want to put this process down. It's a designed process, and roll out in writing an updated and centralized process and policies. Second, establish processes and routines to collect, analyze, and act on talent data to inform organizational development. So what are our centralized tools? We have a lot of data management systems and personnel. Are we getting the most out of those? Or what are the other things that those systems can offer us? So we have good data at our fingertips that is not burdensome to generate, that then we can analyze and act on. 3 through 5, the goals 3 through 5 really have been prioritized for implementation in years 2, 3, and 4. They are establishing a performance management system to include individual and team goal setting and planning expectations, first reviewing and assessing progress in alignment with our priorities. That I've talked about it a little bit, but a total compensation study to compare our salaries against similar markets in New Mexico and make decisions, and then develop and implement capacity building opportunities to support district administrators to coach and develop their direct reports. So those directors, those supervisors who have direct reports. So the next steps, as we finish the strategic plan, refine and finalize goals based on stakeholder feedback from staff and the Board of Education. Some of that feedback has been given and received over the course of the year, but there may be more that you wish to share this evening. Refinement and launch. So by July 15th, we will have public-facing materials to support our organizational-wide and public communications about our plan. And then we want to, by June 30th, update and finalize our performance management routines, including a dashboard, which will be shared quarterly with the board. And so every quarter, as part of that quarterly report, there will be a dashboard that has our goals, our strategies, our goals, our priorities listed out, and how we're making progress on those.
Thank you, Dr. Kettler. Any questions, Mr. Vickers, or comments?
Well, on this data at the beginning here, reading proficiency, math proficiency, and you probably don't have the answers to these completely, but I would like to see that whatever the roadblocks are that are preventing us from seeing better results be identified. Is it English language learners, or what is the roadblock and how can we get through that? That's all I have.
Mrs. Otero,
No, thank you.
Mr. Bennett?
No.
I have a couple. So first of all, iReading or iStation for reading or math, do we know if it's predictive of the state summative exam?
Madam President, members of the board, I do not know that it is predictive. iStation is not, iMesa is. iStation is its own, well, I want to say it's its own beast, but it is.
So why was iStation selected as our interim assessment?
Madam President, members of the board, I do not know other than it is offered by the state. I will have to ask that question because I do not know why it was selected.
And this data is for the 22-23 school year. We don't have 23-24 school year.
That data is for the 23-24 school year, the school year we just finished.
Okay, because on the charts, it says 22-23.
So in the chart, those numbers were from the 22-23 school year. Sorry, I did not clarify.
So what we're looking at, the 39% to 42%, that's 39 for kinder. I'm looking on slide 3. 39% for kinder, that is 22-23 data. The 42% in kinder is 24-25 or 23-24 data. Is that what I understand?
Madam President, no, I'm sorry. The graph itself with the bars are 23-24. In the box, it shows you beginning of the year to end of year for 22-23. So in 22-23, the beginning of the year for kinder was 33%. At the end of the year, it was 31%. In 23-24, at the beginning of the year is 39%, at the end of the year is 42%.
Okay, so over this year, we had an increase in kindergarten of 3% proficient. That's what I'm seeing. And in first grade,
That'd be correct.
we had a decrease in 7% proficient, so barely a quarter of our students are measuring as proficient in reading at the first grade.
According to the iStation benchmarks, which don't align necessarily to
And the pattern, with the exception of kinder and first grade math, across all grades, we have nothing higher. We had sixth grade at 46%. So we have kinder and first in math hitting in the 60%
yeah.
as measured by iStation. Everything else is less than 50% by the end of the school year. In terms of proficiency, up through sixth grade.
Correct. That measure is how many students are meeting end of year expectations.
And at the middle school level in reading, between 40% and 31%. So we're sending 31% of the eighth grade to the high school proficient in end of year expectations.
Correct.
Math, it's less than a third. And I know that you talked about the curriculum coming in and you spoke specifically about Amira. Are we getting all of the dosing that Amira prescribes by school?
Madam President, I will have to look into that question.
And did we use all of the professional development days that were offered to us from the publisher of Amira?
Again, Madam President, let me look into that. And get back to you.
And in terms of that'll tie right in with one of the comments on the strategic plan, where we're talking about, it's priority 3, materials and assessment, adoption and selection, timelines and policies outlined, including priorities for grades and content areas. So we're looking at doing cohesiveness. It talks about baseline data collected for high quality instructional materials and assessment used across the district.
Yes.
The vendor for Amera can provide this support, so we don't have to push that out any farther than a month. I'm gonna quote one of my colleagues, "This data is frustrating." It was really hard. Although we got to celebrate 500 kids meeting a milestone at graduation, when we know this data and 1 out of 3 kids is proficient when we exit them. So this really, in my opinion, our academic performance has to take a lead. It has to be our first and most targeted focus for this next year. And it has to be considering all students and then disaggregated by the requirements in ESSA. I think that this is disappointing. In terms of the strategic plan, were there any comments or concerns for the board members or the update on the strategic plan? Mr. Vickers, did you have any comments?
No.
Mrs. Otero?
No.
Mr. Bennett?
No.
So I have a couple. On priority 1, engaging in a strategic planning process that includes a wide range of perspectives and communicated to the stakeholders by the end of September. PDPs are due on the 40th day of school, correct? So if we're waiting until September 30th when we begin the beginning of August, isn't that a little late in getting this strategic plan out so that we know where leaders and all licensed staff should be aligning their PDP?
This, again, this will be, Madam President, members of the board, this will be rolled out ahead of time. It will be rolled out to all administrators on July 18th at our administration retreat. And I expect to roll it out during the initial days when staff return and they have professional development days. So September 30th, that date needs to be changed. It is not accurate. It will be rolled out first internally, but it will be rolled out shortly after and well ahead of September to the community.
And priority number 2, item C, strengthen staff skill sets, practices, and mindsets to communicate and engage with families. And we have trained school leaders so that they can meet these expectations by May of 2025. Again, I have concern with that. I think that's way too, we need to be engaging effectively with our community and our families. And grading and attendance, priority 2, number D, updating policies by June 2025. That's unacceptable in my opinion. We cannot have another year again where we do not have parents properly informed in a timely way where their students are at in terms of grades. We've raised this in February or March, and that's letting this roll out for yet another year so our families are not clearly informed and our students are not informed, and we don't have clear expectations for reporting grades and progress to families in a timely manner. That to me is not sitting as acceptable. On priority 3, slide number 17, you have a data point here. All schools have shared planning time for at least 60% of teachers and 90% of teachers attend. Why aren't 100% of the teachers attending?
Madam President, I'll have to look into that. I don't have that information this evening.
Okay, and then the coherent study can happen with your vendor for Amera. They offer that as free. For the priority 3, also on item D, where we're talking about 40% of the schools implementing the full inclusion model. This is the first time I know I'm hearing that we have 6 schools implementing the full inclusion model. And I know that that's controversial. So I think maybe we ought to be talking about how we can do an ongoing monitoring of that to make sure that we are first and foremost meeting the students' individual needs, but we're also providing tremendous support to our educators as we're asking them to take on, in many times, some new skill sets. Those are the comments that I have on that. Okay, there are no other comments. Thank you, Dr. Cutler. I know that was a lot to present in one evening. Those items were for presentation report only. No action is needed or warranted at this time. We are now moving on to item H, or I'm sorry, the new item I, former item H, the approval of consent items. And I will read these for the record. This is now the new item I. The approval, I'm gonna make sure that something seems off here, so I apologize. Yes, I'm looking at, I wanted to see something because I thought I was a little bit off here. Okay. I would stand for a motion regarding the consent items.
I move to accept them.
So for clarity, Mr. Bennett, would you be willing to read the items that we're considering for consent,
Right.
beginning with former item I? Do you move for consent? Do I have a second?
Second.
Do we have any discussion? Mr. Bennett has moved and Mr. Vickers has seconded to the approve all of the action items as listed on the consent sheet, and I will list those for the record now. Approval of the minutes, item I-1, May 21st, 2024, which is a regular board meeting. Item number 2, the June 6, 2024, which was a special board meeting. Item K, which is now formerly K, which is now J, Finance Committee items. Meeting was held June 11th, 2024. Approval of reports for the May 2024. Item sub I, monthly check summary. Item sub 2, cash on hand. Item sub 3, investments on hand. Item 4, monthly budget reports. Item 5 is revenue. Under J, number 2, approval of purchases. Item I, maintenance department, annual request to approve vendors estimated to exceed $60,000 utilizing price agreement contracts 31701, 31703, and 31200, 2 mil state match and HB 505C-086. Item former K, 3, approval of general contracts. Sub-item I, approval of annual contract renewals for the 24-25 fiscal year. Number A, district internet services. Item B, district interconnected voice over IP. Item C, on-call asphalt improvements and repairs. Number 3, approval of general contracts. Sub-item 2, approval of annual student nutrition use of commodity food processing cooperative contract number 23-24-01. With the Las Cruces Public Schools. Item 3, approval of general contracts. Sub-item 3, approval of annual student nutrition use of food service products. Contract extension number 2 of number 25-general 2022-23, which is a cooperation with Santa Fe Public Schools. Also item K, former K, now J, number 4, approval of construction contract. Sub-item I, progressive roofing for Sundance Elementary roof coating 31137, which is bond. Item 5, approval of application Title I, Part A. K, number 6, approval of application Title II, Part A. K, number 7, approval of an MOU between the Los Lunas Schools and the Valencia County Foster Grandparent Program for the 24-25 school year. And item K, number 8, approval of the MOU between Los Lunas Schools and Village of Los Lunas for refuse removal for the 24-25 fiscal year. I will call for the vote, or is there any discussion?
Just a brief clarification. Item J was moved up above to the beginning of the agenda.
Right,
So everything beyond item J here stays the same. Because it didn't affect anything after that. So K is still K. Just affected the things between where J was inserted
which J would have been
Down to-
inserted as
down to
B,
K, but not including K.
correct, but item J became the new D, and D became E, E became F, F became G, G became H, et cetera, but I've read them as from the former, or from the board agenda before Mr. Talley's motion and our approval. So for items K. Is that confusing you with the J?
Yeah, I'm just saying, anything beyond that remains the same letter.
Okay,
We only affected the things above that.
yes.
Okay.
Is there any other discussion? For the benefit of the audience, consent item, or I will take a vote, please. I'm sorry. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes,
Mrs. Otero?
Yes.
Mr. Talley is absent. Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
I vote yes, motion carries. For the benefit of the audience, consent items are action items on the agenda presented by the superintendent and staff for approval. All agenda items have been reviewed by the board members individually. If no discussion has been asked regarding these items by any of the board members, the action items may be submitted for approval with one motion or vote. The items that are not consented will be discussed, and we did not have any of those. So we are now for new business. Are there any topics for new business for the upcoming board work sessions or board meetings? Mr. Vickers?
none that I can think of.
So I know that you did list that you wanted for upcoming work sessions, Mr. Vickers, you wanted some report out on the RGE with community input. Is that correct?
Yes, before we're asked to make a decision on that.
So we need to have that as a work session, so that needs to go on our list of work session topics.
Right.
I asked for a work session topic to be on, understanding the number of siblings that will be impacted for RGE, and then understanding the sibling transfer policy. So I piggybacked right off of the RGE. Mrs. Otero, do you have any other topics for the upcoming board work sessions or board meetings?
No, I do not.
Mr. Bennett?
Not at this time.
Thank you. I will now go to the announcement of meetings. We will be having, on Tuesday, July 2nd, a special meeting with closed executive sessions. The topics will be to address or correct dates of the superintendent's contract per his contract addendum, which is signed on 12/19/2023. Discuss and take action on the 3% raise approved for all public school employees. As a Board of Education, we have to act on that separately for the superintendent. And if there are any topics or concerns that may be coming up for the upcoming annual evaluation. Tuesday, July 16 is the Finance Committee meeting, which will be held in this boardroom at 3:00 p.m. Also on July 16th will be the Audit Committee meeting in this conference room or the boardroom, and the attendance is by Audit Committee members only at 4:00 p.m. On July 23, we will be having a board work session from 2:00 to 4:00. This will be all proposed policy updates. So Mr. Garcia, for the policy, that's what I referenced before. That would be a time to be bringing updates for that board policy that Mr. Bennett was curious about. 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock would be a closed session, which the Board of Education will be receiving updates on pending litigation that is ongoing in the district. And 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock PM will be the regular Board of Education meeting. And with those topics that will be announced, and this will occur in the boardroom beginning at 6 o'clock. Item N is for adjournment. I will accept a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes, I'm sorry.
you added some meetings that are not in that list.
That is
Can
correct.
you go back over those that are not on that list?
I am happy to. Tuesday, July 2nd, special meeting with closed executive session.
What time?
What time is good for everybody? Do we want to do a 6 o'clock? Do we want to do a 5 o'clock? Okay. Time, we're going to set a time for the special meeting to be 5 o'clock. Yes, we have to address and correct the dates of the superintendent's contract. His contract terminates.
Could the superintendent be here for that?
If we do that, we postpone correcting his contract until we can set another special meeting between or
I would
before.
prefer, if he was here for that.
Okay, do you have a time that you like to look at or a date?
Just a day when he's
When
gonna
do
be
we,
here.
when do you return?
Madam President, members of the board, I return on the Monday, July 8th.
Okay. I know the week of July 8th through the 11th are, I am completely out of pocket. So we could go the week of July 16th and go after the audit committee. So Tuesday, July 16th, special meeting with closed executive session. Time is at 5 o'clock. Does that work for you, Mr. Vickers?
Yes, I'll be here for audit committee anyway.
Mr. Bennett, does that work for you?
What day was that again?
Tuesday, July 16th,
Yes.
and then July 23rd.
It's a regular board meeting. Okay.
I'll stand for a motion for adjournment.
So move.
I'm sorry, did you mention a workshop in there somewhere?
On Tuesday, July 23rd, yes.
Okay, so
Work session from 2 to 4. And that will be on all proposed policy updates. We have several coming in from the NMSBA policy service, plus if there's any other policies.
Okay.
4 to 5 is a closed session for litigation updates.
on July 23rd.
Yes.
Okay.
And then a regular board meeting from 6 to 9. No, I did not say NMSBA would be in attendance. NMSBA Policy Service has presented. For litigation updates pending. That's okay. No, it's okay. Okay. We ready to go? Item N, adjournment. I would stand for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. I'll call for the vote. Mr. Vickers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mrs. Otero?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
And I vote yes, motion passes course. Meeting is adjourned at 8:42 PM. Board members, if you would please stick around so we can have some signatures.